The Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT is a £150,000 SUV with no options on it. If you want to buy someone's allocation or buy a car that exists already with no mileage, you're looking at over £220,000 in some cases. So with what is effectively a glorified and very fast family car costing that amount of money, I thought to myself, what actual motoring world icons could you buy for under £150,000, the same price as that Cayenne Turbo GT? How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel. I love the Cayenne Turbo GT, by the way. I would love to have one, but I have not got that kind of bread. One day, hopefully. But at the same time, if I had that kind of bread, what other cars are there that I would buy for that same kind of money? I honestly think the choices in this list are going to surprise you in terms of how incredible they are versus an SUV. Don't forget that I'm in the UK, so prices in other countries might be different, and whenever you buy any second-hand car, maintenance, repairs, insurance, road tax, all that good stuff is important to remember. If you enjoy this kind of video, please do hit like. I'd really appreciate it. 1,000 likes, I'll make another video about iconic supercars that are less than half this price, maybe £75,000 instead. And subscribe as well if you're new here. Without further ado, let's get into the video. For many people, the Ferrari Testarossa is one of the definitive Ferraris of the modern era, as it featured so heavily in popular culture, in shows like Miami Vice and films like The Wolf of Wall Street. Famous people like Michael Jordan, Mike Tyson and Dr. Dre also own or have owned them, and they continue to grace many collections today. The lovingly named Cheese Grater has a strange 4.9 litre flat 12 engine, which produces 390 brake horsepower, which will get it from 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. Low figures by today's standards, but in the 1980s it was positively rapid. Now flat 12 sounds weird, but it's also technically correct to call it a V12. It's basically a V12 laid out flat, so the 6 pistons either side horizontally oppose each other. Just imagine turning a letter V into the letter I. That's how I think about it, which is why it's basically okay to call it a flat or a V12. Not only is this a 1980s cultural icon, it is literally named after the 250 Testarossa, which won the 1957 World Sports Car Championship. Fun fact, Testarossa also actually translates as redhead in Italian, referring to the red painted cam covers, which is a pretty cool idea. It was designed by Pininfarina and is effectively a better car in every way than its predecessor, and Sergio Pininfarina himself said the car was an exaggeration in flamboyance. That said, originally the move from Ferrari's smooth, curvy lines of the past that people knew and loved to their boxy styling did cause some controversy, though this was more in line with 1980s car design language and also was ultimately a good decision given how iconic that shape is today. One thing Ferrari didn't fancy doing was making a convertible version until the chairman of Fiat, Gianni Agnelli, commissioned one for himself in silver, which recently sold at auction for $1 million. So instead of getting yourself that Cayenne Turbo GT for £125,000, you get yourself one of these absolute icons, with £150,000 getting you a well looked after 1991 example. As it's a classic, there are numerous buyer's guides worth looking at online before buying one that will give you more info than I can give you in this short space of time, but service history is a must, and aim for one post 1987 when they upgraded the cam belts and that kind of stuff. Now, as I get older, I seem to like Porsche more and more, which is why I actually do highly rate the Cayenne Turbo GT. But it must be said, if you told me I could have either the 911 997.1 GT3 RS or this for the same money or less, I know which one I'm taking. While it maybe doesn't get the same love as the 997.2 GT3 RS, it's still an absolute track weapon and maintains the iconic GT and RS badging, which pretty much every Porsche owner lusts for. The Gen 2 got a 4-litre engine, but the first gen got a 3.6 litre flat 6, which produces 409 brake horsepower, which will get it from 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds, though acceleration isn't really this car's bag, it's more about going incredibly well around circuits. The 996 generation had the GT3, followed by the 996.2 GT3 RS, which was then followed by the 997.1 GT3, then the 997.1 GT3 RS arrived just 8 months later, in typical Porsche fashion, and we still see this general release schedule today. Think about the 992 GT3 being followed by the 992 GT3 RS. As with its predecessor, it was a homologation special to be used in multiple different race series around the world. It has additional weight saving over the standard GT3, including the adjustable carbon fiber wing and the lightweight plastic windscreen, which I've seen owners and reviewers love to tap to prove the point. It's also wider and more aggressive as a car overall, with a slightly lower top speed than the GT3 thanks to that wing creating more drag. You could of course aim aim for the newer 997.2 GT3 RS with the 4-litre block, but that price is significantly higher, more than double in fact, whereas these start at around £130,000, which is absolutely incredible when you compare that to other GT3 RSs, both older and newer. For £150,000 you'll get a 2007 example with around 15,000 miles on the clock, so still very good condition. Owners note these are way too stiff for British roads and need to be taken on track to really shine, but what can you expect from a homologation race car? Reliability is also very good, but if they have been tracked, make sure they've had the right engine and gearbox oils changed at the right times as well. Every so often Mercedes decides to deviate from their more standard cars and create something that properly captures the imagination, like the 300 SL, which is arguably the first ever supercar as we know it today, the SLR McLaren, and the AMG GT in all its guises, to name a few. The SLS is absolutely one of those cars which harks back to the 300 SL in some key ways. But before we get into that, it's worth noting that it comes with a 6.2 litre V8 engine producing 563 brake horsepower, which takes from 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. Not bad at all. It is of course actually a Grand Tourer, same with the 300 SL, but being as exotic as any other supercar and pretty much as performant, plus it's already being named a modern classic alongside cars like the Lexus LFA. It is actually the successor to the SLR, but Mercedes have called it the spiritual successor to the 300 SL as it took full inspiration from that classic beast. The gullwing doors are the most telling sign, but there are other features of the front mid-engine layout, which means the bonnet looks huge up front and then the shorter rear end to match. The SLR is like fairy dust and incredibly expensive, so it's interesting that it's actually not as quick as the SLS, and it's also slower when used in anger on track. You wouldn't have thought a Grand Tourer should be so good at track driving, but it's something Mercedes actually focused on in development and even did a proper time at the Nürburgring at 7 minutes and 40 seconds. What I find weird is that in the early days it came up against the Mercedes SL in terms of comparisons, which seems mental considering how different they are in terms of being exotics, even with the SL having a few V12 options. These are available in convertible form for as low as £120,000, with £150,000 nabbing you a gullwing with relatively high miles for such an iconic supercar, and by that I mean around 40,000. The thing with these is they are modern classics. People are seeking the best examples, so higher mileage ones do actually go for much less than the low mileage ones. Engines should be good, but you'll be paying £500 to £1,000 for every annual service depending on whether it's a big or small service, and gearboxes are also generally calm but have to be replaced as an entire unit if they break, as they come as a sealed unit. A quick reminder, if you're enjoying this video, do hit like, I would really appreciate it. It's very easy to do, it's right down there somewhere. And if you haven't already, comment down below to let me know what you think the most iconic car is for under £150,000. So far I think ones on this list are probably up there. Let me know if I've missed anything. Okay, Lamborghini Mercy, your chick, she's so thirsty, in the words of Kanye West, despite the fact that in the song Mercy he actually shows a Gallardo in the background as he couldn't actually get a Murcielago in time. Either way, the Murcielago is one of the most iconic poster cars Lamborghini has ever produced, with its screaming 6.2 litre V12 engine that makes 580 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. Not bad for a 20-year-old car. It was the successor to the Diablo and the first car to come under the new ownership by VW Group, or more specifically Audi, which is why you'll find many Audi parts around the car if you own one and dig into it. I recommend checking out Matt Armstrong's Murcielago build that's currently happening on YouTube if you want to see just how many Audi parts there are. But don't let that take anything away from this absolute beauty, which was weirdly designed by the same man that designed the first generation Skoda Octavia and Fabia, as well as a whole host of other very normal VW Group cars. He did also design the Gallardo though, so clearly he was a man of many talents. People talk about the Murcielago being the Batmobile, not only because it was used in a couple of Batman films, but also because Murcielago means bat in Spanish. It was also, of course, the name of a famous Spanish fighting bull, as with most Lamborghinis. The first ones that came out were actually the least powerful of the bunch, with the LP640 coming slightly later and offering way more power and performance, as well as a facelift to update the look a little bit. Either way, you're benefiting from a very iconic car with those incredibly iconic air intakes that some people have also likened to bat wings. £130,000 the lowest you'll find reasonable ones listed for, which is way less than I'd expected, and for £150,000 £40,000, you get a 2004 example with around 30,000 miles on the clock, which is quite a lot for a car like this. These are known to have valve timing problems, and the E-gear is known to be hugely problematic, so if possible try to get yourself a manual example, which also should have a longer clutch life, as an added bonus. It's a Lambo though, so expect to pay for upkeep. It's the car that followed the Murcielago as the flagship Lambo, taking the top spot in this video, the Lamborghini Aventador, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who'd rather have a poster on their wall of the Cayenne Turbo GT over one of these. It was produced between 2011 and 2022, with multiple different options available in that time, but for your Cayenne money you'll be looking at a nice 2012 example with around 30,000 miles on the clock, starting at around £140,000, which again is way less than I expected for such an iconic car. It comes with a 6.5 litre V12 engine that makes 690 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. Pretty ridiculous stuff. It is handmade in Italy, and same as the Murcielago, it's named after a Spanish fighting bull, although one that fought much more recently in 1993. On launch they only reported having sold 12 examples, which isn't all that much in modern terms, but within 5 years they managed to shift 5,000 of them, which is pretty mental for the most expensive large production Lambo on the market. The Murcielago was a hard act to follow as it was well loved, and a pretty iconic car already by the time this took over, and there was skepticism around whether Lamborghini could replicate that level of intrigue and success, but the Aventador ended up smashing it out of the park across its 11-year life cycle. Today you will of course see S's, SVs and SVJs which could outdo you, but the same can be said for the Murcielago for some degree, yet people still lust over the original, and I think the Aventador will live long in the memories of car fanatics as potentially one of the final poster car Lambos of the naturally aspirated era. With that in mind, it might be one to buy and hold on to for the right buyer. The engine is known to be very reliable and mechanically sound, which is great news, but owners do complain about the single clutch gearbox being jerky at low speeds. 2013 model year cars were also known for solenoid problems, and there were recalls around fuel system issues. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit the like button, I'd really appreciate it, and a massive thanks for watching obviously. Thanks to patrons as well for their support too. By having watched this video, you now find out about a bunch of cars that you can buy for under £150,000. What if that's not your budget? Well, if you want to look at some cheaper supercars that are available, then please do click over here, and make sure you hit subscribe down here somewhere as well if you're new here. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.